let's study the iterations in JavaScript. For this purpose, I will create an array here, and we can do a very little practice. So let me just copy my array from somewhere else. So this will be my numbers array. Inside, I will have numbers from 0 to 10. So let's see how it looks like. Whenever I print on the console, I will see the numbers from 0 to 10. So actually I already used the first iteration way, which is the for loop. So let's try it for even printing the numbers on the console. So I will just move this inside the loop, and inside the loop, for in each iteration I will get the element from the array on the relevant index. So this is my index now. Get the element of numbers on index I in each iteration. So what happens now? Okay, I get numbers from 0 to 10. Very cool. So there's another way of doing the same thing. Instead of using for loop, I can use for each. So for that purpose, I have to execute that on the array that I want to run. So my array is numbers, right? On numbers, I will execute for each, and for each function takes a callback as a parameter. So what will be my callback? My callback function will be a function, so I can write my function here. My function, let's say, will take a parameter which will be a number, and this function, after getting this number parameter, it will write on the console. Okay, now let's try this one. I will comment out the previous loop. So this time I'm using for each. Again, I have the same thing, right? From 0 to 10. Very cool. So here what I can do is, since this is a function, I can a little bit simplify this by replacing with an array function. So it would be just getting a parameter and writing on the console. Still working, very cool. So this was the second way of doing the iteration, and there is a third way, which is instead of for or for each, this time we will use for of. So let's see how it works. Again, I will have a for loop. This time I will again get the elements of the array by using of. So my element is coming from the numbers array, right? So this number will belong to the numbers. And inside I will do my operation, whatever I want to do here. So I already get the number, so I will just print on the console. Let's comment out the second one. So this time I'm using for of structure in JavaScript. Again, I have the same output. So three different ways, same output. So what is the difference between these three? So as we might already realize, for loop itself is very flexible, right? Because I have the control on the index. For example, I don't have to start from beginning to end. So I can just start from the middle, right? Like if I set the start number to the midpoint, then I will just operate in the second half. Or likewise, if I start from 0 and I will go until the midpoint, then I will operate only on the first half. I will not iterate until the end of the array. So in for each and for of structures, I don't have that flexibility. So this is the very first advantage of for. But as we can see, for each is a little bit more straightforward and easier to implement. It's a little bit more simple. So this might be the advantage over the for loop. But okay, for each might be a little bit more simple than the for loop itself, but it has a disadvantage. So let me show you what would be the drawback or disadvantage of using for each. For example, if my function, for example, here my function is super simple, right? Only writing on the console. But if it was an async operation taking some time, like let me create a function here. For example, this will be inside my function. And for example, let's say this this logging operation will be completed in a random time, let's say from 0 to 5 seconds. I don't know when it will happen. So whenever I'm running this async operation, I still want to have all numbers in order, right? So let's see how I can do this. For example, let me first of all complete this function. Actually, I already prepared that. So let me just copy. It will look something like this. So if this is my function, it is just getting a number and printing on the console, doing the same thing, only with a difference. The difference is this console log operation will happen after a random sleep time here, up to 500 milliseconds. So it might happen after 100 milliseconds or after 200 milliseconds. So if my uh, function, which is calling this print operation, is an async operation or async function, and whenever I call from 0 to 10, I might see different numbers in different orders, right? For example, maybe I will first see 5 and then 0 and then 4 and then 6, because I don't know for each of them how much time I will spend here. So I want to run in a sync way. I want to await until the promise is returned here. So let's see how I can do that. So I have to execute even the here even the for loop inside an async function. So let's encapsulate this with an async function. Let's call it as print numbers with for. All right, I will have the numbers, and then oops, I added to the wrong function. This is the initiation of the numbers array, so I want to encapsulate this one here, and let's revert this here. Cool. Now I have this function, which is an async function, and inside I have a for loop. All right. But of course, instead of just printing on the console, I will call this function, right, which was spending some time to return. Okay, let's see what happens. So to summarize, what I'm doing here is I have a function which is writing on the console after some time, some random time up to 500 milliseconds, and I'm just calling this function with numbers from 0 to 5. All right. I didn't say anything. Why? Because I defined the function but didn't call. So let's do it here. And I should pass the parameter which was numbers here. Okay. So what I see now is actually I couldn't succeed what I was intending to write because I still want to see them in order. This is why I create an async function, but I didn't add the await keyword here because await is helping me to properly wait until I get the response or the return of the promise. So now this is what I want to do. So, okay, this is working very well for a for loop. So let's do the same for the for each loop. So now let's comment out here and let's do the same for the for each loop. For each loop is here. Okay. So again, instead of just calling the console log, I will just call the print function, right? Print. Okay. So I will add the awaits here. But again, I should encapsulate with the async function. So let's do that. Okay, I should be ready now. I am ready, but I want to add await. But here is the thing, right? I cannot use await operator because for each is not supporting the await keyword. It is not an async function. So I cannot use await here. So I have to remove. And whenever I remove it, now let's call this was this time for each. Now I see random order, right? I don't see the numbers in order. So this is a problem about the for each structure. So let's see the last one now, which is the for of structure. So let's remove this one to comment out the second and let's quickly encapsulate this with an async function. This time it is for off. And then just call the function. And instead of console logged, let's call the print with await keyword. This time it did not complain, right? If it was a for each, it was complaining to add the await, but now I could do it. And whenever I call or execute the class, I see all the numbers in order. So to summarize, I have three different structures, all have different advantages and disadvantages. But the very basic advantage of the for loop itself is the flexibility that I can control the indexes or even where to stop, because I can anytime break the loop. But for the other two, I don't have that flexibility for each and for off. And among two, for the for each, especially for the async operations, I might have some issues. But for off, I can just get the relevant member of the array one by one in order without using any index. It is a little bit simpler than for loop itself, but I don't have too much flexibility, just as I do in the for loop itself.